Well, it's pretty much that time where just about everybody knows what's going on for their back to school plan. I'm Nicole with Dear Teacher Instructional Coaching, and we got to talk about this. So today, I was looking on Instagram and I saw a post from a teacher whose district is going to a hybrid model. So they are partially virtual and partially face-to-face. And the post was about all of the problems that happened to us when we did distance learning and all of the problems that we have when we teach face-to-face. And now, because they're a hybrid model doing both, that they now have double the problems to deal with. Yeah, you also have twice the awesomeness and twice the resources and two different ways to connect with kids. I guarantee you that you had some students who flourished in the classroom and were okay online. And then you had kids that you could have snapped across your knee face to face, but they flourished online. You guys, we had a student on my team who, I always liked the kid just because I knew he had a pretty big personality. But he was just such a turkey face-to-face. He was like that naughty kid that you still liked and you're like, God dang, but you're just kind of funny and all that kind of stuff. But he was still he was a kid who would have never gotten student of the month, for example. Online, he always checked in. He got his work done. He was hilarious, and he was totally respectful. He ended up getting Student of the Month because of how he was virtually. And I honestly think a big part of it was he could be kind of as wild as he wanted, and we didn't have to deal with that behavior. It wasn't there because so much of his stuff was, being late and lollygagging in the hallway and just kind of pestering and those kinds of things. And there was none of that. All of that was taken away. We had another student who was ED, and she flourished because there was a lot of the kids in some of her classes were her triggers. She didn't have those triggers. Those triggers weren't even there. So she just flourished online. She didn't have those distractions and those triggers going on. So being upset and focusing only on, well, now I have double the issues to deal with. No, come on. You have twice the opportunity for your kids to be successful. And that's our job. It's our job to help these students be successful. So that kind of leads me into things that you need as a teacher to keep in mind as schools are reopening. And currently I'm still in limbo. I am recording this a week prior to when it will be actually released. So I'm recording this on July 9th, and on July 15th, so a week from yesterday, is when our governor is going to tell our administrators, these are your restrictions. You figure it out from there. So being in North Dakota, Governor Burgum is pretty big with choice, but he is going to have to put some numbers on some things. And in our Smart Restart multiple page document that we've got, really the only thing that hasn't changed is the number of students, not having more than 15 students in a class. But there's also, since we understand that there's probably going to be choice in the matter, that there might not be all students returning to school. Some families may elect to be doing virtual learning, and I do firmly believe our district and all districts will be providing that option. if we don't go to a like hybrid model, if we go all face-to-face, there still has to be a virtual learning component somewhere, just for those families who maybe have either students or members of their household or family that are in the at-risk category for getting ill. So there's, like I said, there's a few things that you need to keep in mind. If you're in limbo still a little bit like I am, you can kind of prep yourself for some of these things based on the stuff that you know and the trends that are happening out there. Or if you've already received your model of what your school is going to do, there's a few things that you need to consider as a teacher. So the first one is your safety. Now I'm going to say safety versus comfortability. Because if you aren't comfortable with virtual learning, for example, because I know there's a lot of teachers who are not comfortable with that, remember, it's when you are outside of your comfort zone that you really grow as an individual. Like, that's where the magic happens. So I don't want to use the word comfortable. I want to use the word safe. What would have to be in place? So let's say, for example, I'm thinking about I will have to be in the building at least sometimes, if not most of the time. At minimum, I will have to be in the building a few days a week. So what do I need to feel safe walking into that building? Well, I'm 32. I have no underlying health conditions, and I do not live with anybody who does. I wear a mask in public. I would maybe wear gloves I would be okay with that just because I feel very confident with my hand hygiene. I would want hand sanitizer in my classroom, and I would want like a sanitation spray bottle with paper towels. That's what I know would make me feel safe. Me having a mask on, which I already have masks, so I would have my mask, the opportunity to wash my hands frequently, or at least disinfect my hands frequently with hand sanitizer, and then having sanitation spray with paper towels in my classroom so we can do a quick cleanup. The other thing that I would also be open to is I would be very comfortable taking my temperature every day, either at home or in the building. I would also volunteer to be at the door taking students' temperatures if absolutely necessary. So those are things that would make me feel safe. And I know I used the word comfortable in there a little bit, but those are the things that would make me feel safe being in the building. Now, if you are not in that boat, and if you are to the point where you're like, I am not safe going back to school in person, then you need to be transparent with your administration with that, and you're going to have to be the best dang virtual teacher you can be. Our district had sent out a teacher comfortability survey about our intention for, like, if we felt comfortable and safe returning to the building itself. You could click yes or no. And it said, if you select no, you are basically signing yourself up for being a virtual teacher, because we will have, there was a survey sent out to families. 55% of our represented student body participated in the survey, and of those 55%, 30% of people said they would keep their kid at home and do distance learning. So there are going to be that handful of families that need their kid to stay at home, and you're going to need teachers to do that, to be able to teach those students virtually. And that could also help with some of the class sizes too, maybe. So those teachers, like if you, like, you have to be transparent with that, but then you also have to understand what that means. What you can't do, what is not ethical and what is not right, is for you to say, I don't feel safe going back and I don't like virtual learning, so I'm going to continue to be a teacher and you're going to continue to pay me, but I'm not going to teach. Like, that's not a thing. Like, no. If you don't feel safe coming back to school, then you will be a virtual teacher, and you need to make that the most awesome experience you possibly can. And I'll tell you this too. So this might be a little bit of a comfort if you're like, I'm not safe. I'm not safe going to the school building, but I don't like distance learning. I'll tell you this. Distance learning can be really great. And I found positives with it. I really did. I mean, the structure of my class lent itself very well to just moving virtually because I had my kids trained on our online learning management system. So they were like, oh, she's just not in front of us anymore. I just have to, log on if I want to talk to her during these times. Like, it was just, they were pretty self-sufficient at that point in the year, at least for my class. So it was fine, but I did feel myself kind of annoyed at the end of the year, and I think the reason I felt annoyed was because I didn't get to end the year the way I wanted to. So right now I'm actually teaching a STEM academy. So this is where I'm going with all this. I'm teaching a STEM academy, and we have like a large group where we all meet, and we're meeting on Teams, by the way. We're meeting on Microsoft Teams. So me and 2 coworkers are meeting with the large group of students. We meet for about an hour and a half, where we have speakers come in and talk about stuff, whatever. Do a challenge, and then we break up into small groups. So that way I'm only working with a select few kids every day. And we have norms. We have group norms, and it's keeping your camera on and your microphone is muted unless you are the one who's talking. But your camera is on because we want to look like we're speaking to other people. We want to see each other's faces on the screen. And it has been awesome. It has been so awesome. So if you're going to be a strictly virtual learning teacher, see if you can get a way to, like, if you're like, okay, I have 15 kids, maybe how could I break it up into like 5 groups of 3 or 3 groups of 5? 5's kind of a large number, but how could you break it up so you're only working, like, you're doing check-ins, like 15-minute check-ins with this group of 3, and guiding them through like a specific process. Maybe you're teaching like the whole class, and then you're like, okay, group A, B, C, whatever you want to do for as far as grouping them. You're going to check in with me at 9, next group 9:15, 9:30, and then you'll have those like little check-ins, because it's super nice to be working with just a few kids. Those of you who are going to be back in the building, hopefully there's a numbers restriction. And the reason I say hopefully is partially, yes, for safety. But how many years have we been fighting the classroom size battle? We've been fighting it. We've been fighting it ever since I've been a teacher, and I've taught for 10 years. I'm going into my 11th year of teaching. Class sizes continue to grow. And research says the opposite should be happening. So, let's try to take advantage of this. Let's prove that this is what we need, is smaller class sizes. Let's prove that we can do this. But we do have to figure out where our safety zone is and set comfort aside, but safety at the forefront. So where's your boundary? The second thing is you need to be solution driven. So like that Instagram post I saw, what solutions are you providing? You're not providing any. You're just pissing and moaning about the problems. Problem solvers solve problems. They don't complain about them. And what do we ask our students to do? If they come to me with like an issue with like maybe something they're working on, I don't just solve it for them. What do they learn if I just solve it for them? Nothing. So we're going to brainstorm ideas. Gosh, I don't know. Even if you know the answer is to restart their computer, for example, you got to guide them to it. And it's kind of annoying right away. It's a lot of work right away. I will admit that. But after a while, they start saying, just restart your computer. It solves like 95% of your problems. Yay! They learned that. And so it's better than me just constantly telling them. I'd rather coach them to a solution rather than give them one. And so I'm hearing a lot of, how do I do this? And there's two different ways that people are saying, how do I do this? One is, how do I do this? AKA, I don't know how. I don't want to know how. I want somebody else to figure it out for me. The second way is, I don't know how to do this. Let's figure out how we can do this. And that second way is the way we need to be thinking. You don't have to figure out how to do this on your own. You don't. Not at all. In fact, you shouldn't. You should be working with your colleagues. So in this STEM Academy, my two coworkers and I, these days that we've been together, that's what we do. When we have a little bit of downtime, when the kids maybe are just kind of working and we're just kind of watching them and we're muted and whatever, we're having our own conversations. And we are brainstorming possibilities. We are figuring out, granted, we don't know 100% what our model is, but based on what the trends are and based on what we know is still in that Smart Restart document, we can kind of have a pretty good idea of what's going to be going on. So we're just brainstorming all kinds of ideas and bouncing things off each other and being like, well, what would be the problems with that though? Like, what's going to happen? And almost try to play devil's advocate so that way we can kind of predict issues and then come up with solutions for those issues. So I remember when we first went to distance learning, and a bunch of teachers had their knickers in a twist about how the students showed up as participants, which means that students can share their screens, they can mute each other, they can participate in the chat, all that kind of stuff. And they were like, well, what if they mute each other? Okay, first of all, I never had a problem with my students doing that to each other. They're just very respectful individuals. And it was as simple as, but that's a good question. Like, what do I do if I have that little turd who keeps muting other people? Well, first of all, you can make them an attendee. You could also kick them out. But you can make them an attendee, and that way they don't have that control. They have to just sit back and watch. So you could do that, or you could, like I said, you could have just kicked them out. But the whole point is to obviously try to keep them in there as much as possible, but you just make them an attendee and then they're not able to do that anymore. So coming up with those, like, this is a cool idea, but maybe what could go wrong with it, and how do we find solutions for those potential obstacles that could get into our way. So be solution driven when you're asking the question, how do I do this? Because it's our job. It's our job to figure out how to do this and how to do this in the most effective way. We have been trained in best practices. So how do you apply those best practice principles to the current model that you've been given? And then the third thing is to choose your attitude. I'm a huge believer in choosing your attitude. So kind of same thing. There has been a post that has been going around on Facebook, and it's directed towards parents, and it's saying, like, basically no matter what, somebody's going to be angry or somebody's going to be unhappy, but how you react as a parent is how your kids are going to see that, and then they're going to embrace that attitude. So if it's a negative attitude, that's what the students are going to embrace. And here's the deal. You can't do that. Parents, you cannot do that, and you should not be involving your child in those kinds of conversations. And if you are feeling stressed, your kids aren't the people to be having that conversation with. It's mentors, spouses, friends. That's where you keep that conversation. So that post has been kind of going around lately, but the same can be said for teachers. You know, not just what we post on social, because that affects parents, and if you have a public account and kids can see you, that's also going to affect your students as well. But when you do finally get to the point of seeing your students for the first time, if it's virtual, you gotta make it fun and you gotta make it awesome, and maybe there's a way. So like when we did the STEM Academy, we put together like 4 weeks ago, we put together their STEM Academy kits, and we dropped them off at their houses, like after they checked in on the first day. So maybe there's something where you're like, okay, so for this unit, virtually, these are the supplies I need them to have at home, and you put together that kit and you do like a delivery thing. Yeah, I get it. It takes time, but wouldn't you rather have them have the supplies at their home? And if you're trying to break it up, like, you could just do it quarterly. So you're just doing that trip one time a quarter, and maybe it's for your whole team, so you're all working together, and then you can split it up amongst your team. That would make life easier too. So there are workarounds. There are ways to be, happy and positive and joyful and exude that to your students and when you're in public. And sure, when you're alone with your teacher friends and it's just the few of you, you can vent. You can vent a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. But then you're like, okay, 2-minute vent sesh. Let's go. Timer's up. We're good. Everything's good now. We're ready to move forward. Because sometimes you do. Sometimes you just got to complain a little bit. But don't do it on social media. Don't do it in front of parents. Don't do it in front of kids. Only do it amongst other adults. So your friends, mentors, people who understand maybe a little bit, spouses, significant others. Go ahead and do your little vent and then move forward. Be like, okay, thank you for listening to me. I feel better now. I feel like now that I got like the emotions out, I can be solution driven and be very positive and encouraging for my students. So that is something that is really important. I actually had a professor in college who once told me that acting is like teaching. Teaching is like acting. They are one and the same, because when you are a teacher, it cannot matter what you have going on. Those little humans in front of you are the most important thing. And you have to make sure that you are positive and encouraging and helping them solve problems, and that they are your focus for that day. And so if something is wrong, you gotta shelve it, and you gotta act, and you gotta act really well, because kids can see through crap. And so if there's something like, maybe if it was something as like silly as waking up on the wrong side of the bed, because some days we just wake up crabby. That's just, I don't know, you don't sleep well, you don't get the deep REM sleep, and so you wake up and you're kind of cranky. Your kids can't know you're cranky. Like, you gotta lock it up a little bit. Times where I do think that it's fine to show that emotion is like the loss of a loved one. I think it's actually important that you would tell your students that, so they can almost see you grieve and understand that it's okay to grieve and it's okay to be upset, because we as adults do get upset, but we can't get upset over like stupid petty little things. Or if you're kind of having a conflict with another teacher said something to you in the hallway that was super irritating, that's water off your back. Like, you just gotta move forward with your day and act like everything is fine. So a lot of teaching is acting. And even if you don't like the circumstance that you're in, once you have those kiddos in front of you, you gotta act like you do. And you gotta be excited to see them. And you will be. Seeing these kids during STEM really has made me miss connecting with students, even if it is just through a screen. It made me appreciate the fact that we live in a world, where we are connected to our kids. Not every school can say that. Not every city can say that. Not every country can say that. So we are pretty dang lucky. And we can't be sacrificing education just because we aren't comfortable with a certain circumstance. We do have a right to draw a line with our safety and figure out what's going to make me feel safe, if anything, going into the school. How can I be solution driven? And then choosing that positive attitude. Dear teacher, you can do this. and you can do this well.